Welcome to the Curiosity Podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Brown. I explore my curiosity of really weird things, existential things, pop culture stuff, spiritual phenomena, animals, and all the other things with subject matter experts. What isn't there to be curious about? In today's episode, we explore my curiosity with Will and Jada Smith. You might have heard of them. Kind of popular, kind of known, kind of a celebrity black royalty. Until recently. The Smiths were a curious couple to me for many years, and in a good way. They were mysterious. We didn't really know anything about their marriage, except that they were married. We heard the rumors, but again, we knew nothing. However, enter July 2020. Jada Pinkett Smith admits to having an entanglement with her son's friend, a young, troubled R&B singer named August Alsina. Then, March 2022, Will Smith slaps Chris Rock on stage at the Oscars in front of the entire world. Mystery about the two went out the door, but my curiosity grew exponentially, and so did the curiosity of many, many people, as showcased in the comments on social media. Here's what people had to say. So, I asked today's guest, Dr. Katherine Woods, a licensed clinical psychologist, to join me in exploring so many aspects of my curiosity with Will and Jada Smith. If you're listening or watching this, you too must be curious about them. So sit back, relax, and discover how maybe your own curiosity of them might be a reflection of something going on in your own life. So we are, as I said earlier, in this episode, we are going to be talking about Will and Jada. And so with this episode being titled, What's Up with Will and Jada? We want to explore people's curiosity behind this dynamic couple, Will and Jada. And so I am so honored, so pleased to have someone that I think is the perfect guest to weigh in on people's curiosity when it comes to Will and Jada. So we have Katherine Marshall Woods. She's a licensed clinical psychologist in Washington, D.C. She earned her Bachelor of Arts and doctoral degrees from the George Washington University. Dr. Woods is in private practice, is a member of core faculty and director of clinical training at the George Washington University, and is a faculty member of the Washington School of Psychiatry, teaching clinical supervision skills for mental health professionals. Now, what's interesting about Dr. Woods is that she holds interest in the intersection between psychology and film. Dr. Woods has lent her expertise to a number of media outlets such as News Channel 8, NPR, The Huffington Post, The Daily Drum, and is the former host and co-producer of a Healthy Mind television show. She finds joy in working with actors, screenwriters, producers, and directors on theme and character development, set and diagnosis accuracy, and collaborating with film festivals. Welcome to the Curiosity Podcast, Dr. Woods.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yes, I'm so glad you're here. I know I said a mouthful, and so that everybody knows, I did not write that. I just read completely off of her website, which was well written in and of itself. So Dr. Woods, if you could help me just in layman's terms, explain exactly what you do to people, that would be helpful.
Sure. Well, I am in private practice, so I do provide therapy services. Most of my therapy services actually provides treatment to individuals who have a history of trauma or interpersonal connection challenges. I also, of course, am a part of core faculty with the George Washington University, where I teach trauma. I teach psychological assessments like performing cognitive IQ testing and other sorts of assessments. And I also teach a class called Psychodynamics and Cinema, where we think about what psychological dynamics are actually occurring within cinematic works and some episodic works as well. And I also have a television show currently that I co-produce as well as host, which is called Best Psychology in Film, where I interview filmmakers regarding their film developments and their creative process, and also pull out the psychological dynamics within their work. This show was actually began as a spinoff to the book that I have, which is also called Best Psychology in Film.
Thank you for that. I was thinking that we wanted to jump right into Will and Jada, but now I don't think I want to go there just yet. I want to know what are maybe two or three films that you think hit it out the park in terms of a psychological, what's the word? Sort of a psychological, um, what's the word I'm looking for? A psychological sort of development. Yeah, psychological development of characters. What are maybe two or three films that stood out to you?
Yeah, that's actually a large list. So I watch a lot of films, in part because of what I do, and I read a lot of scripts based upon what I do as well. So I will choose three that comes to mind quickly. The film Manchester by the Sea, I believe that was created in 2017, 2018 time, maybe 2016, is a wonderful film that has a beautiful character development that highlights grief in various different individuals based upon their relationship that they have with the individuals within their lives. It explores all sorts of grief of a father, grief of a father losing their children, a grief of a mother losing their children, the grief of a marriage, and the grief of hope that people can be different based upon where they are psychologically. If you are curious about grief, that is a beautiful film to watch and to begin to think about all the different ways that people may be grieving in their lives and how challenging it can be for people, and be able to build empathy for the individuals within your lives who are experiencing a sort of grief, which doesn't always equate to the ending of someone's life, but the ending of someone's circumstance. Or again, the hope that they have of a circumstance to be. It's a beautiful film. Again, it's beautiful in aesthetics, but it's also just a beautiful film in the way that each character really is psychologically quite rich. Um, Another film that I would say kind of hit it off the park, which is like an old time favorite of mine, is Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, actually. And I know we're about to get Wonka that's coming up. And so this is a wonderful film that hits it out of the park. It provides a lot of morals regarding what our expectations, at least in the US, and how we treat people, how we are expected not to treat people, how we desire karma to be a part of it, that when people behave poorly, we expect something bad to happen. If you recall that each of the little children who were naughty, something bad did happen. Not only did they not win the chocolate, but they also experienced some things that were maybe unpleasant to them. We also look at that film and see parenting styles and parenting attachment, how people raise their children. And, according to this film, is that the naughty children are a result of the parenting that they've gotten, whether it's boundary parenting, whether it's pretty aloof parenting, whether it's too wide of parenting in what the children are being able to have access to. But one thing that I don't think that we talk about a lot in that film, which I do think it hits out of the park, is also how adults can take children for granted in some ways. And even though a beloved adult in one's life can also be quite harmful. And that is actually one of the things that we do see, that has a beloved grandfather, Grandpa Joe. And in many ways, we see that Grandpa Joe actually did take Charlie for granted, albeit he loved him and adored him. But this is a person who was a capable person and was not contributing to the family. He was once Charlie did get the golden ticket, he jumped out of the bed and started dancing. And it wasn't Charlie's golden ticket, it was our golden ticket. And at times singing, "It's my golden ticket." And actually, Charlie was at risk of losing everything because Grandpa actually encouraged him to drink fizzy lifting drinks. And so we see that if it wasn't because of Charlie doing an altruistic thing at the end, which was giving up the everlasting gobstopper, he would have lost everything, not because of him, but with the encouragement of this beloved grandfather. And there are more ways that I can think about and other examples from that film that I think is really important. But psychologically, it hits it out of the park. in a way that is not in your face. It isn't clearly psychological. You're not thinking this is a psychological film. And oh, it sure is. Well,
Wow. Wow. I just want to touch on what you were talking about with Grandpa Joe because I'd never realized that. I think it's also important to note that his grandfather can still be beloved, like he can still love him, but then his grandfather had his flaws, right? Because he's a human being. And I think sometimes psychologically, I know I've dealt with this and I have a therapist, very open about it. And I've been diagnosed with having black and white thinking, which is it's either it's kind of difficult for me to live in like the gray, like people have to be kind of all good or all bad kind of thing. And so I think it's so important to note that people really do have their flaws, and they're not even sometimes characteristics that you can completely pinpoint. And maybe you don't need to pinpoint it, it's just a flaw. We love them, right? But it's good to be aware of it, right? You make me want to watch that movie again. That was so deep. Oh my God. He literally jumped out of the bed, even though he was bedridden. We thought he was bedridden. And clearly, the motivation for him jumping out was a golden ticket,
that's correct.
you know? Wow. Okay.
There are a million
Let's,
other examples I could provide from that
oh my
film.
God.
It's one of my favorites because of how detailed it is. And like you said, people are in the gray. Most, at least I believe, and I think most people in our profession believe, is that nothing is all good or all bad, that those flaws actually make individuals real and who they are. And those flaws can be equally beneficial to our lives. Those flaws, I mean, not all of our role models are good. Sometimes our role models actually are exhibiting behaviors that don't work for us or we feel like are harmful or even unhealthy. And there are role models because they show us what we don't want in our lives. And that actually helps protect us and helps us thrive too. And so, even though Grandpa Joe, for an example, but I think, everyone who walks this earth is equally flawed, is that those flaws actually do serve a purpose, not just for us, but also the people we love around us.
You are preaching, Dr. Woods. Okay, I think this is the perfect time for us to move into Will and Jada because keyword flaws, right? I think we are there. So, again, this episode is What's Up with Will and Jada. We are getting curious about these two because the world has been curious about these two actually for many years. Um, a lot of mystery has surrounded the couple until recently, particularly with the Red Table Talk when Jada Pinkett Smith decided to, in her words, bring certain issues, problems, transparencies to her red table. And it has opened up um, criticism for people to sort of look into her marriage with Will Smith. So yeah, let's get into it. Both Dr. Woods and I have Will and Jada's memoir. Will's memoir is called Will. Jada's memoir is called Worthy. Dr. Woods is the only one who has read both. I have only read Will, but I have both here, and we are going to dive into either one of them or both of them as we sort of see fit. So, the first question I want to throw out to you, Dr. Woods, because I feel like with you reading both memoirs and seeing what's going on with these two in the news and people's curiosity in general, why do you think people are curious about these two?
Mm. Well, I think most people are curious people, right?
Yeah,
That's life.
yeah.
Like us as human beings, we're curious. Um, in ways that serve us and ways that doesn't serve us, right? And some people are more curious in a social manner, like they want to know like what is happening socially around them or the people who are in their lives. And people who are in our lives include the people we see on television. They become a part of our lives. When someone's famous, they become a part of our lives because we see them on television all the time. And many times with the media the way that it is, we can follow like what they're doing, um, literally in real time in sometimes. And so there's an attachment that people create with this person and celebrity. they become real objects for them. And that's a natural phenomenon. It also happens when individuals watch them, especially like with movie stars in particular, because not only are we getting data and information regarding them personally, but we also are seeing them in characters. And now, granted, yes, they're characters and they're acting. But if you were to look at, let's say, a number of one person's films, like let's say Will Smith's films, for an example, and you watch him in one film, and then you watch another film, and you watch another film, he's acting. And even still, you're able to pick up on some of his mannerisms. And after you've watched him in enough films, you could pretty much anticipate, like you could a good friend, that he's going to make this like look with his eyebrows, or this kind of smirk, or this kind of reaction, or he's going to tell a joke right here. Like you get to know these people even through the course of their anthology of work. People, even in acting, can't really hide all of who they are, which is actually why we like the actors we do, actually, because they do bring in a part of who they are. And when we have that piece of who they are, just a small piece, and it's still guarded by the characters, by the script, by the wonderful lighting and all of the makeup that people wear. And when it's filtered and how much they put on social media, I do think people are curious and they want more. Because what they realize what they're getting is the reality is that it's all curated to some level and they want more. And so that's where I think the drive of the curiosity may come from for people. And so I don't think it's just Will and Jada who gets this level of curiosity that's placed on them. But I think just being in this sort of career, and the way that they have been in this career, which is very successfully in this career, where you get a lot of data about them, but it's also quite structured data, curated data, that then people desire more and they have more questions and they'd like more answers. So writing two books was very smart.
I agree with you. For so long, as I touched on a little bit, we knew very little about Will and Jada's marriage. We had only heard rumors. Oh, they have an open relationship. Oh, Jada is a lesbian sometimes or bisexual. Same thing with Will Smith. Oh, Jada, now that we have a little bit more information, oh, Jada is not only a princess, but a tyrant, somebody who is enslaving Will Smith, right? Will Smith is there against his will. He's been hoodwinked, bamboozled, all the things, right? So, with these memoirs, we do get to make judgments about who they are because now they've opened up more to us in these pages, and we can definitely analyze every single thing that they say. So, I want to start with Jada's memoir. What in Jada's memoir made you a little bit more curious about her than you were before?
Mm, that is a good question, and I will answer it in one moment, because you said something really important. You
Okay.
Now that they've written these books, people now are more curious, and it gives them an opportunity for judgment. And as you just articulated, even without the information, without the books, people were still judging, right? So the books like give us more information and more clear information from them, from the source. But people were already doing that work of judgment. Without the facts, I suppose, from them that they wanted to offer.
And
So,
you know what? I'm sorry, Dr. Woods, to even interrupt you. Before you answer that question about Jada, I want to know, is it okay to make a judgment? I think that it is. I think it's important for my survival. I think it's important for my intelligence. I think it's important for how I move forward. To be curious about something, get the information, and then make a judgment. What is the relationship between curiosity and judgment? When is it unhealthy? When is it healthy? God, this
yeah,
is loaded. I know. I know.
it is such a loaded question. Yes, it's first of all, I want to say really human to have judgment and to make judgment. Actually, we understand it to be a healthy process. Actually, when we're doing a psychological evaluation, for an example, we make note of people's judgment. Do they make good judgments? Because, like you mentioned, it is necessary for survival to make a good judgment. We don't necessarily walk out on Park Avenue without looking both ways. That is a judgment call, one that can save your life, right? So we look for people to create judgments. When it becomes, let's say, have a negative connotation, is when people say, I'm making a judgment about you or about a person rather than a circumstance or a situation. And depending on what the circumstance and situation is, sometimes it's even more allowable. Like, of course, you can make a judgment about walking out on Park Avenue and looking both ways, versus, of course, you shouldn't make a judgment about a person. But sometimes, depending on the relationships we have with people and the data we have regarding how this person interacts and how they navigate the world, it is necessary to make a judgment about that too, and about them and their behavior. Their behaviors do not fit into the type of lifestyle I'd like for myself. And therefore, my judgment is to stay away from them. And that too can be an act of survival because of your judgment about that person and what their behavior is like. I think where it becomes dangerous is when those judgments become fixed and when they become rigid and inflexible. That you've had a judgment about someone and their behaviors that have, been warranted and has served you, but now you see that this person has shifted or changed or grown in some ways and hopefully evolved, and you are still holding on to that fixed judgment that you created in yesteryear that is no longer even warranted, applicable, or even like relatable to who this person is. That you're not willing to grow with that person or to be able to see their evolution, and because that is so fixed, then you have the opportunity to miss out on who this person has become, quite honestly. And so judgments are, again, appropriate, pretty natural. Good judgment, wonderful, keeps you safe, keeps you alive, hopefully puts you in healthy situations for you and what you deem is healthy, which is relative. But also being able to be open to change and curious as to what that change looks like in people over time.
Thank you for that. Oof. Okay. Let's get back to the Jada question now. So, what about Jada's memoir made you more curious about her
Hmm.
after reading it than it did before?
I have a lot of curiosities about her. One of the things I appreciated very much was her vulnerability within the book. Something that she articulates, that's something she's worked on, is how to be vulnerable. And I felt like her book was extraordinarily vulnerable. Um, it made me just curious as to who and she is. She shares how she became who she is today, which was very generous in doing so. I mean, she went back to very early years regarding her childhood and what has contributed, at least some of the events that have contributed to who she is. Um, but I'm curious as to who she is now more. What does she want in life? How does she decide who will be in her world and how she will get it? Um, I am curious about the relationships that she will craft in the future and what those will look like for her. I'm also really curious about what sort of professional endeavors that she would like to do, because she has done so many different things in her career. I really am not just curious, but also quite excited to see what's the next thing for her or what she'll continue to do. Um, I'm much more curious about her in those capacities, um, more than I was before reading her book.
Was there ever a curiosity for you about her marriage to Will? And again, I have not read, where are they? Not read it, but just sort of based on what you've read and how she's talked about her husband, um, I'm going to ask you, what is your judgment in regards to their marriage?
My judgment is from both of their memoirs, not just hers, because I feel like it needs to be a balanced account. is that they've managed their marriage in the healthiest way that they know how. That they've been thoughtful, they've experienced insight about who they are as individuals and who they are as a couple, and they're making the best choices for themselves. And it doesn't necessarily reflect, let's say, social norms in which people are most comfortable, at least in the States, with. Um, but they're making it for themselves so then they can be happy. And my judgment is good for them. If they're happy, that's fantastic that they've been able to find a way to be in a marital partnership that serves who they are in authentic ways, which I think is really important. I mean, we see a lot of times that married couples or any coupling and partnering, takes obviously negotiation and compromise. And when we say compromise, you're thinking no one is going to get exactly what they want. And so many times we see that certain couples have a lean as to who gets what they want and who doesn't. And then there are people in the marriage or the partnership that walks away and they feel like they've compromised too much of themselves. One of the things that my judgment is that it sounds like, at least the way they describe their marriage, is that they figured out a way not to do that anymore, that they figured out a way to really have space to be able to be curious about who they are, take the time to be able to explore who they are, and then be able to determine for themselves what they want to do with that knowledge and how they want it to manifest. And they've decided to love one another and support one another through it. And that sounds beautiful.
I love that you say um, how, your judgment is that they've, I guess, basically decided to accept each other, right? And good for them. I am not there. I am not there. Not just when it comes to Will and Jada, but I'm a newly married woman.
Congratulations.
Thank you. We've been married a little over a year and a half. And so when I would see all of these viral videos of Jada talking about her love for Tupac, um, her, in my opinion, her deference, if that's the word, or almost indifference toward saying that she even loves her husband, I was triggered because I'm like, that's not how a wife is supposed to behave. And I think that's how a lot of people have sort of viewed it. There's so many layers to this, right? Because not only is she a wife, she's a Black wife. She's a high profile Black wife to a Black husband who, for many, many, many years, and even today, in my opinion, seems like a good Black man. So Jada, for me, has been, still to this day, sort of moving in a way that makes me very uncomfortable.
Hmm.
Um, because in a way, I'm like, how is she just doing this? And she continues to be with this good Black man. There, I said it. Okay. I said it. So as we're talking, I'm thinking, yes, I am making judgments on her as a person. I'm making judgments on their marriage where they have both said they're fine, they love each other, they go through their thing, but I don't believe it. And so my curiosity really is lying in, how are they doing this? How is this possible? How is this possible? So again, I haven't read Jada's memoir, but Will's book, and I'm sure I need to read her memoir to have it balanced out. But in Will's book, he talks at length about how his childhood really informed how he approached relationships. As a child, he saw his mom get beat up by his dad. One particular instance psychologically paralyzed him to the point where he didn't act. And he felt like because of that instance, he had to protect all of the women in his life going forward. And so when I read that, and this was before the Oscar slap, before all the things, I'm like, oh my gosh, poor Will, poor Will, poor Will. And so while watching Jada going on her press junket, and I have to also disclose, I met Jada. She came on the podcast that I produced for her, so I just want to disclose that. But meeting her, the viral videos, all those things, I'm just like, Will deserves better. I have to be honest. I just have to be like, my God. And I'm thinking, is she taking advantage of him? Like, does she have a spell on him? What is happening? So yeah, I'm wondering how you assess my curiosity and those similar to mine when it comes to these two. You know, how would you sort of like break that down, you know?
Yeah.
And be honest. Be honest.
I will. Don't, I'm like, I will. Yeah, I one thing that I would assess is, this is not the first time, first of all, that I've heard these sorts of comments regarding their marriage, right? I live in the real world and, I hear obviously things about what's happening in social media and socialites and famous people, and most people have something to say when it comes to their relationship. And we note that curiosity is really a natural thing. And so I'd wonder, what is it about this marriage that creates such an evocative experience for people? Like, why does their marriage in particular create such a buzz? I mean, there are lots of famous people who are married, and do not get the same sort of like coverage about their marriage, or the rumor mill doesn't happen about their marriage, or even people don't necessarily even take the time to judge their marriage. So what is it about this couple that makes them more of a lightning rod to be able to be receptors of that sort of response? And I have various like hypotheses regarding that. I mean, I think part of it is that many times they were pretty intimate and didn't share much about their marriage. And I think that the lack of information wanted people, people wanted to know more. I agree. There probably is something, at least in my opinion, there is something about being a Black couple in Hollywood where, I mean, Will is very clear that for many years he was the top, paying superstar when it came to films. And so here we have this person who has acted in so many different characters, superhero. Most times it's a superhero who can save the world. We have this image of people who are in these action films of who they are, not just in the action film as that character, but who they are in real life, that they then deserve the best. Um, and for him, he's already chosen that, it sounds like. Jada was the best for him. And that was his decision. It isn't the public's decision to marry him off to who we think is the best for him. It was his choice, and it remains his choice. It remains their choice. And it's interesting how, as a public figure or a public person looking in on their lives, we find ourselves having more freedom to be able to make those judgments because we can say them and there's not huge consequences because chances are they're never going to hear us. Right? If we were to make these sort of judgments about people who, like, your uncle and aunt who's married, chances are they're going to hear you and you're like less communicative about those judgments unless they're solicited. But when it comes to famous people who you may never meet, unlike you, because you've actually interviewed Jada Smith, is that we can easily say our judgments and there are no consequences or very little consequences because of it. And because they are public figures with reputations and the way they present, it's almost like we get to project who we are onto them. Like, if we were Will Smith, we would want this kind of person. But we are not Will Smith, and he has again chosen the person he wants. We're not him. So we can project, if we were him, we'd want someone maybe different than Jada. And that's something for us then to be curious about in ourselves. Like, okay, if we were this, huge famous movie star, what would we want? Who would we want to share our life and our world with? Okay, it may not be Jada Pinkett Smith. Well, who would that be? And what would that relationship look like? And so I think they provide us an opportunity to project onto them. And so it's really, the goal is that if we project, it gives us an opportunity to get the reflection back to us. So then we can reflect and be curious as to where are these thoughts and feelings coming from truly. What if there was a way to ensure the behaviors of characters in your next film reflected the behavior that happens in real life? What if you knew the actors were fully prepared to give you the psychological depth of the character? What if you could know for sure the audiences saw the pathology of their family, friends, and co-workers in the characters? What if your next film project had the best psychology in film? PyschMinded Media works with filmmakers to craft characters and themes that honor the human condition in authentic ways. And you can watch, listen, and learn how filmmakers put the best psychology in their films.
Well, we are going to wrap it up here on this episode of What's Up with Will and Jada. Thank you so much, Dr. Woods, for joining us. This has been such an eye-opening conversation. I knew you were going to be an amazing guest in our talk before, sort of pre-interview, I guess you could say. You are so dynamic, and I can't wait to see, hopefully, because I am like an HBO stan, I want you to work on an HBO show, okay? I am putting that out there in the universe right now. Yes, we need your psychology background in those characters. So thank you again for joining us. Is there anything that you want to add before we get out of here?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that even the article talks about is the idea of being joyfully exploratory in your life, that giving yourself the opportunity and space and time to be curious, again, to bring more joy and richness to your world. Many times we get bogged down with the day-to-day responsibilities, and we don't make time to be curious, and we think that's for children to do. But honestly, part of being a human is to explore the world. It really can be our oyster, and to find new things can bring, really, it can change your life and the whole trajectory of where your life is going. So if you have time to be curious, that's great. And if you don't, try to take the time to be curious.
Thank you again, Dr. Woods. Thank you so much to our guests for joining me, and thank you for listening. This episode was edited by Chase Parker, hosted and executive produced by me, Jennifer Brown, produced by Latrice, Lauve, and distributed by BlakOWND Productions. I hope you'll join me again on another episode. The Curiosity Podcast is a safe space to not only explore my curiosity of all the things, but yours as well. And together, we get to dig a little deeper as to why that curiosity exists in the first place.